Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the final segment of the day here on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. And it should be a good one to close out today's show. Previewing Sunday Night Football, a big one in the AFC West. The Chargers taking on the Chiefs. Kansas City, 3.5-point favorites. Minus 175 to win. LA, plus 145 over under 43. And this one, like I suggested early on in today's show, could be a quote-unquote changing of the guard. I mean, not for the entirety of the game. We're going to see elements where the Chiefs certainly would feel like the worst team in this game. I feel like it's not necessarily, like I mentioned in my pick segment, going to hurt them in this one, and I think they'll eventually prevail and ultimately prevail in this one. But we're going to see moments, like I said, where the Chargers can get their thing going, and it's going to look better than the Chiefs. We're going to start to say, hey, we could potentially see the Chargers win the AFC West next year. That's what it's going to look like. But overall, when thinking about this game, I just see this Chargers team maybe get overawed too much in crucial moments to truly hurt this Chiefs team. Now, I know that the Chiefs have been playing pretty poorly against weaker opposition. They've had a lot of one-score games and games that you should feel they should dominate it in. Again, for example, the Panthers game and this past weekend against the Raiders. Or not weekend, Thanksgiving weekend. Black Friday was that game. But ultimately, this Chiefs team certainly feels like it can get got on any given Sunday. And while the Chargers, certainly have the feel of a team that could upset them, I feel like the reason why I can't buy into it that much is obviously the run game, because J.K. Dobbins being injured truly does impact this team in a very negative manner. And we saw it against the Falcons in a game in which I thought would be much more exciting offensively, so to speak. But I do feel like there are going to be moments where we see the best out of the Chargers offense, and it's all going to start with Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is no slouch without a run game. Yes, it kind of was a shock to his system perhaps in that game against Atlanta, because he is starting, like I said, to get used to what Jim Harbaugh wants out of him, to manage games a little bit more. But when we think about Justin Herbert and the reason why he's starting to become, in many people's minds, an elite quarterback and not just a pretty good one, is because of the fact that we've seen it before with Brandon Staley, where Justin Herbert actually had to play a lot more hero ball than he's playing now. Do it convincingly enough to say, hey, this guy's going to be something in the league. And this is perhaps the biggest game of his NFL career. Not to place too much emphasis on it, but I do feel like it is. Just because of the situation he's in and what he can do to really prove that the Chargers are going to be an AFC West contender for many years, potentially win the AFC West for many years down the stretch. And so that's why, even though this run game is not going to look as potent as it has in recent weeks, Justin Herbert has the opportunity to say that he can still prove to be a competent guy when you need him. And I know, that the Chargers are still going to try their best to employ Jim Harbaugh's philosophy in this one, because they invested a lot into changing how their offense looks. But I do feel like there are going to be moments in this game where Justin Herbert's going to make some timely throws that remind us of what he was doing under Brandon Staley. And not for nothing, I do feel this receiving corps starting to trust itself a little bit more. Ladd McConkey's really grown into potentially being Herbert's go-to target, a very timely receiver, especially on late downs. He can move the sticks in a timely manner. Not necessarily a yak monster, but a guy who can understand the position at a very high level and understand what his quarterback wants out of him as well. And then you have guys like Quentin Johnson and Joshua Palmer who have underwhelmed throughout their careers here, but I feel like are still receivers who are reliable enough that Justin Herbert can trust them to make key plays down the stretch in this one. On the Chiefs side of things, the reason why I think they have just enough is because, yes, I mentioned that they weren't necessarily dominant in one metric or one aspect of their game. Their offense, defense, and special teams are all pretty middling at this point in the season. But the reason why I still think they're going to win this football match is because they're the Chiefs. And I know it sounds cliche to say that, and I know that eventually luck's going to run out for them again, and they're going to lose a game they potentially should have won. But I do feel like the Chargers right now are reeling a little bit, and the Chiefs are a better team than anyone at sensing that. And so that's why the Chiefs are going to dominate when it matters and ultimately win this football game. It's not going to be pretty, yet again. It never is for this iteration of the Chiefs. But I do feel like there are moments to be had for the Chiefs in terms of just gaining the upper hand in this one, just enough to pull it out. And so that's why I always have to look at this Chiefs team and respect them enough to say they're capable of beating anybody and they're capable of beating themselves. And that's the only way they're going to lose, if they beat themselves. And while the Chargers can pose a threat there in terms of forcing mistakes from them, I still feel like they're not going to do as much as we think with it. I think that this offense, if it relies too much on Justin Herbert early on, the pressure's going to catch up to him. And the Chiefs can prove more than anyone that they can close with their defense in a more potent fashion than anyone in the NFL. And that's why that scares me. Because Justin Herbert can play hero ball for 3 quarters straight and potentially have the lead late in the fourth. And then on an important drive, throw an important pick and the Chiefs come down and kick a field goal on him. That could really be the game script. And so that's why I'm always worried when I feel like a team has a shot to upset the Chiefs. The Chiefs always find a way. And so I want to give more respect to the Chargers here, but ultimately I think the Chiefs can cover this one. And then in terms of how the coaches and how game plans could come into this, I feel like Jim Harbaugh is going to be a little bit too overambitious in trying to find some semblance of a running game here. But ultimately, his insistence on trying to maintain that running game could come back to bite them late on. Because late in the game, I feel like the Chiefs had this ability to drag you into what they want. And so I can sense a period where Jim Harbaugh might not be as sharp in play calling and his offense stagnates as a result late in this one, whereas Steve Spagnuolo and his defense are always on their game. Spags always has a plan for every down of every game. And that's what scares me for the Chargers here, because Justin Herbert's going to have to do a lot of processing at the line. And he's going to have to know when to audible a play, when to improvise, and when to stay within structure. Because this Chiefs team is going to smell blood from the moment you let your head down. And so that's why I can't necessarily persuade myself that if the Chargers get into an opportunity where they have a chance to win the football game, they're going to take it. Because as much as I love what Jim Harbaugh's done to this team, potentially going to win Coach of the Year when all is said and done, there is a moment where you're going to have to let stubbornness fall to the wayside. I'm not sure that he's going to be willing to do that, even with that injury crisis in his backfield. And so that's where Steve Spagnuolo is going to sense he can pounce with his defense. And as much as Justin Herbert, and I feel will have a fantastic game here, take care of the football, be as efficient as possible, and ultimately not put your team up against a wall, it's going to be for naught because of the fact that the Chiefs are going to win it anyways. And I know that I'm rambling on, and it sounds, like I'm going in circles over and over again, but that's what the Chiefs do to you. They lull you into talking about them in a way that is repetitive, because they are repetitive. Because end result, more often than not, for the Chiefs is repeating winning every single time. And when you find a team that's consistent, that's all you can say about them. No matter how good or bad they play, chances are winners win. And that's what stands out to me in this Chiefs team. Yes, they're a lot more vulnerable than past iterations of this team. But the Chargers are in a situation here where they're still the hunter. They're not the hunted just yet, like I suggested. And in this matchup, when you're the hunted and you just suffered a significant injury in your team and it impacts your coach's play style, and thus it could impact how this game plays out, chances are the Chiefs are going to take advantage of it. It's that simple. One weakness, and the Chiefs are on to you. And that's all it takes for the Chargers to tighten up a little bit and get out of the side of their game. But I still think there are going to be moments where we can't ignore what the Chargers are becoming, because they're becoming a very special football team. They're believing and buying into Jim Harbaugh, for better or for worse. We'll find out in the future. But overall, this Chargers team cannot be ignored. But I still have to stick with my guns here and say the Chiefs will find a way to win. It's a divisional game. It's going to be tough. But like we saw with that blocked field goal against the Broncos, they just find ways. We saw in that game against the Bucs, they just find ways. We saw in overtime against the Panthers, they just find ways. And no matter what, no matter if it pisses you off or not, the Chiefs are always going to be at the top of the pedestal come season's end. It's what winners do. And the Chargers just aren't there just yet. Let me know what you think about this game in the comments below, because that will just about do it for today's show. This has been the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I've been Christopher Shepard, your faithful host. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow to conclude the week here on 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Like, follow, and subscribe to the show in the network. Also, make yourselves available to the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. Other than that, I am out for today.